Hey folks, my name is Talha, and today I'm going to be your host for the episode. We also have one of our other co-hosts here with me, which is Zarmeena Khan.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about productivity. In case you really did miss Firas Ali, we also have him on the episode, but here he's going to be with us as a guest.
He's in the hot seat today.
Exactly. Today we talk about productivity culture, how your interpretation of time affects your productivity, why being unproductive is productive, and also some productivity cheat codes you can implement into your daily lives.
This is the Glass Prism Podcast. Enjoy.
So throughout this episode, what we're going to do is sort of talk about what's productivity, what makes people productive, what is the productive mentality you want to have, etc. And so I'm gonna kick it off, right?
Okay.
I'm gonna ask you sort of a couple of questions, and we spark this discussion. Why are there people more than ever trying to maximize their productivity? And is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Okay, so it's a good thing that you started off with that question because that gives some historical context to the role of productivity in our lives. And historically, basically, expanding people's productive output was not a priority for anybody. Like if you look back in the 1900s and in the late 1800s, even before then, only those who were slaves really thought about working 100% of their time, or at least thinking about how they're going to produce something. Like the Great Wall of China, for example, was built by slaves. Those people woke up, did work, went back to sleep, right? And you can create that contrast of how it is now. A lot of people are really looking to expand their productive capacity to levels where they feel like they're productive 100% of the time. Funnily enough, the opposite side of the spectrum, there are a lot of people who also cannot get into the productive mindset, often end up having procrastination episodes that last years, mostly because of the fact that they feel that they are less than those who are productive. And culturally, we have not necessarily cultivated an environment for healthy productivity. And this is why when you talk about these two sides of the spectrum, it feels like a lot of people, when they classify themselves, it's a binary thing. You're either very productive or you're not, right? And so why is it now different? Like what is it doing to us? Well, we know from, for example, an article actually on the Washington Post talked about productivity, and it says it's measured most simply by the government as output per hour. So that became a national preoccupation after the Great Recession. But yeah, like things culturally have changed. If you've noticed anything during the pandemic as well, a lot of people were like, take this opportunity to do something, learn something new and all that. That's fantastic if you know how to do this properly, because the vast majority of people will try to fill up their time senselessly.
Yeah, productivity was definitely a big theme throughout this pandemic.
Yeah, for sure. How to maximize your time that you have on your hands.
Yeah, there are so many books about the adverse effect of overproductivity. In fact, if you take productivity's definition and you try to apply it to the current productivity standards that people go through, not much about it is productive. If it's coming at the expense of your health, your relationships with your friends and family, with your spouse, whatever, how could something that requires such a cost be productive, right? And a lot of people need to think about this as well whenever they're doing it, especially in school or their jobs or whatever. Like, what are you giving up to do what you are doing? And is it worth it? Because if it's worth it, then you found out like, okay, here's my goal. But how am I going to achieve that goal? And the idea of efficiency within achieving a goal is the concept of productivity. Right? But if your goal isn't to do whatever and just to fill up time, that's not productive. You're just wasting time, right? So we'll get into like the techniques about how to become a more productive individual, but in a healthy way. And touch upon everything else.
Interesting that you bring this up. So far, twice or three times you've mentioned healthy productivity. Often the case is when you hear somebody say, you should be productive, productivity is good and all that. you automatically think as though this is a positive thing, a positive thing to add to your life. And often positive things are very healthy for you. So I was wondering what you mean by healthy positivity, because when you say healthy positivity, there's obviously
productivity, you mean?
Oh, sorry. Health. When you say healthy productivity, you also, that also means that you believe that there is a unhealthy productivity. What would that entail?
Look like?
Yeah, what would that look like?
That would look like, let me give everybody like a visual illustration. For those who are listening, most likely you go to a university, okay? Whether it be UTM or somewhere in Ontario or outside of it, doesn't really matter. Vast majority of people either go to university or go to work, right? There are a lot of people that they know look burnt out, or a lot of people have experienced the feeling of being burnt out.
Definitely.
Right? So when we talk about unhealthy productivity, it's the idea of chasing the productive title, or at least doing something that you believe is productive at the expense of yourself, right? Productivity should be a mechanism of building oneself, not coming at the expense of yourself. So it's a self-development goal, not the opposite of that. So that's what redefines productivity for me, in contrast to how the vast majority of society takes it, right? So a lot of things have been touted as a productive thing. For example, if you look at Elon Musk, the man sleeps like 3 to 4 hours, wakes up, has like 3 different companies. Emma, is anyone ever going to mention that like Elon Musk was not productive? No one's going to ever say that Elon Musk wasn't productive. But is the definition of productivity to you going to be achieving what Elon Musk did? The answer is most likely no. And you shouldn't do that. Like there are enough Jeff Bezos, Elon Musks in the world. We don't need a group of billionaires trying to run the world. You're not trying to achieve things that come at the expense of your fundamental enjoyment of life. And not only that, it comes down to the fact that vast majority of people who end up devoting themselves so religiously to things that they have practically been enslaved by ends up like counterproductive more so than it is productive. Right.
So you're probably, if I were to give a scenario, for example, is like me, let's say we're studying for our exams like crazy, right? At the end of the day, we don't get enough sleep throughout like a month's time, right? That's how long an exam period usually is. A month's time without sleep, without doing anything, without meeting people. For example, a lot of times some people don't even go out, right? Well, when we're studying for our exams, and all our goal is, and in our mind, we're thinking of, getting a good grade is being productive because it'll eventually lead us to a career we want or something, right?
That's very interesting that you mentioned that, because I've had a friend who told me that, their quantitative measure of being productive is this quantifiable like measure of grades, or like, let's say if you're working at a company, it's your performance appraisal, like how many sales did you make,
or the raise you get next month or something.
So these type of things, it's based on like a linear output of how much work you do equates to how much of that you end up getting, right? But then again, like that's a very minimalistic, very fundamentalist thought process, because now you have considered only one variable in your whole sense of productivity. You've basically like minimalized it all into just one thing, and that becomes destructive. You should never focus on just quantifiable things. You need to also know, first, like, what is it that I want to quantify? And second, what is the qualitative stuff that cannot be quantified? For example, the quality of time that I spend with my friends. That's not, no one's like with their notebooks trying to make sure that they're having
clocked in, clocked out.
Yeah, exactly. With
spend time with, for us, 5 minutes was enough. Time to go.
5 minutes, 34 seconds. Yeah. Okay, we're done.
Yeah, even though here's the thing about productivity, and the vast majority of people would not understand this until they've become overly productive, is that sometimes being the most productive self requires you to be not productive at that moment in time, right? Imagine it like this.
Wait, are you sort of saying that not productivity is also being productive?
Yeah, at times, because here's why. You yourself, you're not a machine, meaning that eventually, if you started off at peak performance, your performance will go down, right, over time.
So how does productivity relate to time or time management overall?
The idea about time is actually very interesting because productivity and time are covariants in the game of self-development, right? So they go together like a horse and a carriage. Yeah. The only issue is that people are hysterically bad at interpreting time or using it effectively. So I want to illustrate two ideas of the concept of time. And one of them relates to the idea of the number of activities and time we just talked about. So it relates to the idea that having a lot to do feels like we achieve a lot in the first place. So in this hypothetical, Zarmeena, you are a UN ambassador, a researcher, an author, an Olympic gymnast.
Wow. That's a full resume.
Yeah. Talha, you're a tennis coach and a volunteer at the local mosque.
Oh, that's better than I thought you were going to give me.
So assuming both of you have the same level of productive output, okay, therefore you do the same amount of work in that given time. Let's say you work for 7 hours.
Okay.
Who does more work?
I would say me, no? I have many more things to do.
No. You both have the same productive output.
Okay.
Okay. That means both of you work just as hard.
Okay.
All right. Who has achieved more?
Would it not be
Wouldn't
me?
Wouldn't it be Zarmeena?
Because
given the amount of time that she's worked and we're working equally, right?
Yeah. I'm working on more things, so I would have achieved more things, no?
No.
How come?
You both have the same productive output, therefore you do the same amount of work, except Talha was probably more successful in completing the tasks and doing them well. Zarmeena most likely did not provide the amount of effort her tasks were due because she simply did not have the time.
Because I was stretched so thin.
Exactly. Right? So 7 hours is the same 7 hours for everybody. That's not a luxury that Jeff Bezos can buy, right? Everybody has the same amount of time. If in a day, everyone gets 24 hours. Okay? That basically should solidify the idea that your productive self is not necessarily related to the amount of activities that you do. If anything, you should be more focused, right? You should be more focused into a set of things that you're doing.
So it's not the number of things you do, it's the effort you put into the things you do.
Exactly.
I see.
So as for like the concept of having a lot of things, you know, Tim Ferriss, one of the most famous podcasters and authors of this generation, he said that focus on being productive instead of busy. Right? A lot of people are very busy a lot of the time nowadays.
So what's the difference between productivity and being busy?
The difference is being productive is knowing how to use your time. Being busy is just using the time.
Okay.
So wait, what do people get wrong about productivity? Because it feels like such a simple topic, simple thing that's thrown at you. But I'm assuming based on what you said, this is something that I didn't think about, right? I didn't think about the fact that the more effort you put into an event, it reflects on the productivity rather than the number of things you work on. That's something I got wrong. But what are the things in general that people get wrong about productivity, including this, of course?
Okay. So first, it's about realizing that productivity is a journey of self-development, meaning that the activities you choose to partake in should be limited, but benefit is plentiful. In contrast to the idea of productivity that preaches variety of activities for limited benefit. Okay. So in the vast majority of people's minds, the belief of doing a lot means being productive, as we already talked about. And this often divides up their mental and physical resources to like 100 different activities, right? So, which, yes, might offer variety, like, and gives the impression of a well-rounded, proficient person, but no skill related to such activities reaches a refined level to the point that focused practice would. Okay.
So there's a lack of quality in the work.
Yeah.
Just because you see a bunch of listings on somebody's LinkedIn profile doesn't mean that they're exactly productive. You could have somebody with 1 or 2, 3 achievements compared to somebody with 20 achievements on their LinkedIn page. You don't know which one's more productive until you see how much effort they put into each category, right?
Exactly. And that's the interesting part, because this doesn't mean you forfeit the activities you currently do because they're too varied. In fact, do make sure your activities are as varied in skill sets as possible, because so that develops yourself. You just need to pick them carefully, initiate an equilibrium about like how much work you end up doing and how much rest you end up taking, right? And the reason that I want people to like really take up activities with a different skill set is because that's where the well-roundedness comes from, right? Yeah. Now, the amount of things that you do, for example, if I were to do a specific activity that, let's say, playing football or soccer, okay, right? And I said, I'm going to play soccer for 4 hours, right? And because I'm a professional soccer player or whatever.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. But am I good at a separate sport because of the fact that I do these things? No, it's a lot of this practice is focused only onto one sport, right? But unfortunately, unless you're a professional soccer player, chances are you're not going to be doing one thing, right? You're probably going to require a lot of different pieces of knowledge in various different fields moving around in your career in the future, right? So people need to focus on like, okay, I'm studying this right now. What are the required skills I'm going to need? And what are the things that I'd be interested in learning, right? And the more varied they are, the more well-rounded, the more unique of a person you become. Yeah.
Exactly.
So if I wanted to simplify this for the listeners, instead of taking like 5 big projects in life, choose 1 or 2 big projects. This consists of like your main focus in life, like studying in med school, possibly doing your work at a job. Then choose 1 productive and consistent pastime. And then choose 1 to 2 productive, enjoyable activities. So an example is like my big project is school. I'm getting my neuroscience degree. So, and my consistent and productive pastime is my executive consulting job at the UFT Business Association, right? But my 1 to 2 enjoyable, productive activities is the podcast, right? Which is basically low-key a way for me to just enjoy talking about interesting things with interesting people, learning about things along the way.
Yeah.
Right? And
So it was, you broke it down to basically 3 categories, right? One was the project that you're trying to chase after or achieve in life. The other is the pastime. That's the main
focus of your life.
That's the main focus. Then the pastimes. And then there was a third part. What was that?
So like 1 productive activity where it's like kind of like
your side hustle.
That's your main goal.
Kind of, yeah. Okay.
Like a side thing.
Actually, that's
the right way to think about it.
That's a better way to categorize that. Yeah. So like think of it as like I have a main thing 9 to 5, a side hustle, but then like 1 or 2 activities that I do that are equally as productive that I do for fun.
Right. So like
exactly.
Like
so
for example,
we basically define the differences between like hobbies and
work and just
side hustle
work,
and pastimes. Okay.
Exactly.
So this leads me, I was just really curious about this, but would sleeping be considered? What category would sleeping fall into?
Hell yes, man. Like, I'm not sure if anybody noticed this, but it doesn't require a complete genius to figure it out. If you don't get your 8 hours of sleep, you are not being productive. Even if it like at that time, let's say mathematically, think about it like this, all right? Let's say you sleep for like 4 hours.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Everyday student.
Yeah, like some people, I'm not sure.
Especially now.
I'm not sure if you've seen this like on TikTok where like there are CEOs who are like, you should sleep 4 hours and you should dedicate like your whole life and every single minute to your project. It's like, no. What the hell are you thinking, man?
In regards to that, I saw, sorry, before you go ahead, I saw Casey Neistat. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard of Casey Neistat, right? The videographer, New York, all that. But basically he did this thing where he made a whole video about this subject where he said he trained himself and his body to only sleep 4 hours a day.
That's insane.
And he broke it down and he said, basically, I know we're getting slightly off topic here, but we're moving into the sleep topic, but he basically said the first couple weeks when you try to sleep for 4 hours, it's doable. The first week, like the first few days in the first week is like, okay, you can sleep 4 hours, but then you will hate it. You will be grumpy. You won't be able to focus on tasks for the first week or 2. And then you'll start slowly but surely noticing that you're able to get used to the 4 hours. Your health, you may not be able to do physical tasks as well as you used to be, but after the 4 week stage, right? After a month has gone by, your body's able to get used to this mentally and physically eventually as well. The first 2 weeks is you getting used to it mentally, and then the next month is you getting used to it physically, because your body's so used to just being able to sleep 8 hours a day or longer hours continuously. And then when you change it to 4 hours, you cut it in half. Just like that, it's a big skip.
But why would you even want to cut it in half?
So he basically said that 4 hours, essentially, he's basically using what Firas mentioned earlier. He's basically saying that, he's comparing how many hours somebody has in a day, right? Mm-hmm. To be more productive, everybody has the same amount of hours, mm-hmm. right? And given, whatever tasks everybody has, the more hours somebody has, for example, that same example that Firas gave us with you versus me, right? Mm-hmm. If you had more hours, right, mm-hmm. you could technically or potentially be more productive, right? Mm-hmm. But because we had the same hours, it was hard to tell. And maybe I was more productive because of the less events less tasks that I had to do. But in this case, Casey Neistat was saying that because, you have more hours in the day, you're able to get a whole lot more done. You're able to be a whole lot more productive. So he's essentially increasing the number of hours.
But see, it's coming at the expense of his sleep, though. His productivity,
and that's why I was wondering
this coming at the expense of his sleep.
No, but that's the thing. You're not more productive.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not going to work. In fact, there are a lot of high performers that do sleep their 8 hours, mm-hmm. and they also achieve a lot, mm-hmm. right? The thing is, those same people that end up sleeping 4 hours, right, and doing a lot in between or whatever, are also the same people who forfeit their time with their friends, family, and whatever. Mm-hmm. But those people who do end up sleeping for 8 hours ultimately are more productive, but they just also understand that there are more important things than just trying to focus on your career, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. right? And so that's why a lot of the people that you might bring to mind about productivity gurus are those people who end up forfeiting those extra 4 hours of sleep. But here's a scientific way. Let me just put it into numbers for you so that you can see what it means. Let's say you are an athlete, right? And people who work at their peak, like athletes who expect to be working or performing at their peak during a 90-minute, for example, match, they do not plateau and stay at their highest level of productivity at a constant. Okay. Mm-hmm. In fact, if they were to do their best day in and day out, they have to unwind periodically. Mm-hmm. You need rest, proper rest, mm-hmm. when you do your best to allow your body to get back to being its best. Mm-hmm. Love the rhyme scheme here. But what does this rest look like? So after 7, let's say you've that performer worked for 7 to 10 hours nonstop, right? Mm-hmm. And then would it mean that 7 to 10 hours work nonstop, then sleep, shower, work out, and do nothing is a productive way? And I say no, right? That's mm-hmm. not how to do it. Mm-hmm. In fact, you should never work a consistent amount of hours at a high peak level. Yeah. That burns you out.
That's not sustainable.
It isn't. So you need to rest between sessions of high performance. So imagine a graph where you measure performance with time. First, the first 2 hours you perform in something and your performance is at 100%. Mm-hmm. And in the third hour, it's 75 going to 40% by the fourth hour, and then 20% for the next 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So halfway there, you're already at 50% capacity or lower.
Yeah, because if you keep going, have you ever tried working at 100% for 3 hours?
You can't do that.
It's just not possible, mm-hmm. right? And then afterwards, you really plummet. Mm-hmm. You really go
crash,
down.
Yeah, for sure.
And so if you're a procrastinator, this is even worse. The very first few hours, you're 30 to 40, then close to the deadline, you're at 100 for 1 hour and a half. But then you start to slow down because you're burnt out from all the procrastination and stress.
That's true. Procrastination burns you out. You wouldn't think procrastination burns you out. Even just lying down and procrastinating is actually burning you out.
Because you're stressing. You know why? It's because you're sitting in that moment and you're knowing I should be doing something, but I'm not. And that nagging feeling is mentally exhausting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So consider compromise, right? Let's say for every hour and a half, you take a break for 15 minutes.
Okay.
Scientifically, by the way, you get back to 100% and you only need 15 minutes after 1 hour and a half. You're recharged in 15 minutes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If after the 1 hour and a half, 3 sessions of 1 hour and a half, you take a break for an hour, mm-hmm. every single time you restart that 1 hour and a half, you're back at 100%. Mm-hmm. There you get 100% for 4.5 hours in a span of 5 hours, mm-hmm. and 15 minutes. which is amazing because we just talked about like 7 hours, you get 350. Here in 5 hours, you just had 100% for 4.5 hours, which is like 450 units. Already you're performing better.
Yeah.
Right? And this is what I want people to do is like, whenever you're studying, don't cram, even if you're good at it. Even if you're good at it, here's why. Because you want to do better, make sure you just like give that opportunity for your brain to have that rest period. Because by the way, you're processing that information subconsciously.
Yeah, your brain needs time
about it
to consolidate that information, which is why sleep is so important after you're done studying.
Yeah, so I'm not going to get into the neuroscience of it about like why that happens,
which would be also an interesting topic as well.
But this genuinely ends up consolidating the information, as Zarmeena said. But most of all, you go back to 100% performance instead of like going to 30%.
Which then allows you to do more work too, and hence you're a little bit more productive.
I've noticed that. Yeah.
So that's one way of like basically like a cheat code to make sure that you do well, right? Is avoid doing it. I'm not saying like sometimes a teacher or a professor will tell you is like study for 2 hours today, study for 2 hours tomorrow. And there's some studies that, you know, like show that that's great. But like there are also separate studies that show like you don't need a whole day. You don't need to wait a whole day.
Okay.
Literally just like study for an hour and a half. Make sure that you use that hour and a half for studying and like really purposeful studying. And then after an hour and a half, go do something fun, man. Like go watch something silly or
do a podcast episode.
Maybe not. Because that takes up a lot of energy. But like do something that you feel will give you that energy back.
Do something that re-energizes you.
Exactly.
What if the podcast energizes me?
And culturally, this is integrated in many different areas, by the way. Like, I'm not sure if you guys know about the siesta culture.
Never heard of siesta.
In Latin America and Spain.
Do go on.
So people who work in Spain or have lived there will know this, is that they nap usually between 2 and 5.
Okay.
And stores close between 2 and 5, and they reopen in the evening. Basically, these people are not working 8 hours straight like we do here, right? They take a break and then they get back to work. And that's such a fantastic integration to how a population can stay more productive and more happy and more healthy. I'm not sure if you've ever been to Spain. Those people are very healthy people.
Very happy people.
They're enjoying Mediterranean cuisine, right? It's like basically they're all very low in cholesterol, very active individuals. People
got
who
the
are
football
very
culture.
sociable. Yeah, exactly. They have such a well integrated culture. This also is very, very similar to a lot of different cultures within the Mediterranean. In Libya, we do this as well, by the way. That's where I'm from. And we do stop working for like an hour or two and then get back to work in the evenings. So that works out.
There's a thing where I remember in the UAE, right? In the Middle East, in a lot of Middle Eastern countries where prayer times, right?
Yeah.
Because Muslims, right? Those Zohar times specifically, because that's during work hours.
Yeah.
You're allowed to take a break during then to go pray and then come back. So a lot of workers would take an hour break, 30 minutes, an hour break, even though prayer takes like 10 minutes to go down to the nearest mosque and you pray. And I think that's also probably has a good effect on workout output and stuff.
Yeah, it's very functional, especially for those who do practice the religion, for example, that end up taking it. And I personally find it recuperating when, for example, during the semesters that we used to come in here in person, whenever I used to do that, it took me out of the world of like, I am in a stressful environment, I'm studying, whatever, and put me in a meditative state. And for those who are not particularly religious but spiritual, they can always meditate. For those who are not both, they can always do something else that,
like sleeping.
Yeah, like napping and stuff like that. Either way, do something.
Like basically intentionally take time out for yourself.
Do something that's either a pastime or a hobby or rest time, basically. Yeah. Right. Not your main thing, basically.
Exactly.
Okay.
And try to do it mindfully.
Gotcha.
This is the second thing that I need to talk about regarding productivity. And that is, even during the times where you're working, let's say, and you're taking rests and whatever you end up doing, you need to do it mindfully.
Be conscious about it?
Be very conscious about it. And it looks like, basically, if you're going to take a break, stop thinking about the exam. If you're going to take a break, don't worry about the assignment. That just defeats the purpose. Don't go on social media and like start scrolling. Your brain is going to just like take up all that information.
Don't go back on the group chat talking about the assignment.
I know so many people
who not a break.
Who are like, I'm taking a break, and then you hear them on the phone. It's like, do this, guys. Make sure you get this done, okay?
Yeah, that's not a break. If anything, you're just like gonna make that break longer than 15 minutes. You're wasting time. Might as well just sit down and do your work, because that's what you're doing, right? And yeah, like when you do that, especially practice. But when people think about practice and productivity is very important, because when you want to be productive, you want to basically have that development in a specific skill or some type of assignment, activity, whatever. And that usually requires refining your skills. And to refine your skills, a lot of people just try to do the same thing over and over again. A lot of people think that, practice makes perfect, but it's mindful practice that makes perfect. If you make those same mistakes 100 million times, that outcome is not going to change. Right? 2 + 2 is still 4, regardless of however you write it. Of course. It doesn't matter. So why would you keep trying the same thing? Everybody, whenever they're doing things, need to put a little bit of cognitive effort about, how do I change this to be more mindful? And this is especially important for those who are studying. Like, if you are studying and you're taking notes, and the notes take you like 4 hours for a 1 hour lecture, you're doing them wrong. You don't write everything down from what the professor says.
Why am I being attacked?
Yeah, I also feel like I'm being personally attacked as well.
It's so important.
Stop attacking everybody for us.
Could you imagine the amount of time you will have to yourself if you were purposefully, knowingly doing things that teach you just the same amount of information,
but in less or equal time?
With less time. Like, a lot of people will do this, mindlessly start copying off the textbook. Like, there's a textbook already, man.
Yeah, for a reason. You just need to read it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter the font. You don't need to write it down. That's not gonna... I don't care what anybody tells you about, like, oh, if you write it down...
Actually, no.
You need to make sure that you're thinking about what you're writing.
Yeah, for sure. But sometimes, for me specifically, like, it does help writing it down if I'm being intentional with that writing it down. It helps me consolidate, okay, like, this is what I'm writing, and then I see and I try to form some patterns or some acronyms, whatever. Like, that's how I study.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. But I think what he's getting at is, don't rewrite the textbook.
Yeah, for sure. Don't mindlessly just, like,
But that's
copy.
the thing. When you do that, let's say, even mindfully writing notes, right? If it takes a long time, how long can you maintain that focus? You very quickly transition to a point in time of
where you're subconsciously
you're just repeating.
Of course, you know how professors teach. They say stuff and then they have stuff on the back on a presentation, right?
Our education system is actually screwed, but
it's like this. You'll write down one thing that you feel subconsciously. You'll say, okay, let me write this note down. It's probably on the slide or something the prof said that seemed important, because it seems like, okay, this is something they'll ask on exam. But then slowly, while you're writing that, you'll find yourself slowly writing the whole friggin' PowerPoint presentation. And before you know it, 30 minutes have gone by and you've literally been just writing the presentation word by word, and you don't even snap out of it until you realize the prof is going too fast. And then it hits you and you say, what the heck did I just write down? Because it didn't even translate into your brain. Yeah. It's just down on paper.
That's why people after class usually go to the library and try to figure out what they've written. Right? So, like, at the end of the day, why the hell have class? Just write me the notes that you're talking about. Right? Like, why am I attending class? Because you can only do both pretty well. Like, either or pretty well. You either can sit down and pay attention to what the prof is saying, or you can write down everything they say. Chances are you're not going to be able to do both pretty well. You know, attention is a limited resource, and cognitive psychology is very, very well known. If you are attending to one thing and that thing is taking up, like, let's say 2/3 of your attention, say typing down, only 1/3 of your attention is paying attention to what they're saying. And at that point, if it's continuous, like for 2 hours, sometimes we have 3-hour lectures here.
Those are brutal.
Yeah, you're not gonna
retain any information.
That and attention
even with their breaks as well. You don't retain information.
So this is why it's very important when it comes down to productivity. You need to make sure that you're mindful and you take the breaks mindfully
and intentionally.
You mentioned a lot of stuff that people can do to be productive. What are some actual tips that you could break down for people to take into account into their daily lives to be more productive?
Never make your to-do list at the beginning of the morning. Always do it at the end of the day. The reason being is because you always feel like you're gonna be extra motivated, extra productive every single day, right? At the very beginning of the day. But when you do it at the end of the day, you already know how much that day took.
Patting myself on the back because that's what I do. Good job, Talha.
Yeah. Okay. Like always do that. Like there's an inherent bias in doing it in the morning. Divide up your work schedules into little bits and pieces that is achievable, right? So even little things that you think that you need to do, even if it's just a little reminder to take the trash out, that little tick at the to-do list gives you that
so satisfying.
That sense of accomplishment. Yeah. Whether that's making your bed.
And that releases dopamine in your brain.
Yeah.
And it
makes you want to do more. Yeah.
Exactly.
So write down stuff like take out the trash, make your bed, get breakfast, change your clothes, like all of this stuff that you do anyway, so you can visually see how much stuff you are doing. And again, with the dopamine release, it makes you want to do more.
Yeah. Make sure that the items on your list are not redundant items, because let's say if you do make make your breakfast, if you end up taking that off every day, doesn't feel like much, because you get used to taking that off. But make sure that whatever it is that the items that you need to do for your to-do list are in bits and pieces, whatever it is. Don't put get into med school on your to-do list, right?
Break it down into
that's just not you're never gonna get there until the end of undergrad. So avoid that. Do simple things like read. If you, for example, need to do an assignment, you need to read a book, do a couple questions, do the lit review, then
make an outline.
Yeah, exactly.
Paragraph by paragraph. Yeah.
Write those down, and once you start taking them, it will feel more motivating. Right. Another thing is that I already talked about basically taking breaks in between. That is going to help a lot of people.
Get some sleep, folks.
And one of the most, before we end this episode, I want to talk about this, is that do not fill up your to-do list for the sake of filling up your to-do list. As I said at the very beginning, Tim Ferriss's quote about focus on being productive instead of busy. Don't try to be busy, be productive. Think about the things that you're lacking in your life, right? Make those things goals. Make those things intentional things that you want to achieve. And then focus on a plan about how to get there. So think about your productivity plan right now. Every single person's vision of productivity is different, right? Stop looking at other people on Instagram and LinkedIn and thinking to yourself, man, these guys are successful. It's truth is, these people think about the same thing about other people. Probably people that you believe are less impressive. That scientists will always look at the dancer thinking that the dancer is doing something remarkable. The dancer will always be so taken aback by the scientist's complexity. That is life. You pick and choose what you end up getting, right? You're never gonna get it all, right? Definitely. Unless you want to be a scientist dancer, then that's a different story.
I mean, it's great that we had this topic today about productivity, mainly because, first of all, it's exam season for a lot of people, especially namely myself, who literally was just suffering through a boring lecture, going through notes, trying to reteach myself a topic. And everything that you mentioned, all the way from categorizing, how to allocate your hours, what sort of events or
types of activities
that you want to do, right? And all the way down to, the idea of how to accurately study, how to properly study, for example, if you're putting in, for example, 4 hours into 1 hour worth of lecture, right? How that can be unproductive, right? All that, everything that you talked about definitely helps, because right now I throughout while you were talking, I was just thinking back about how I was doing things wrong. I was studying wrong as well. And now mentally, this is sort of like a pastime, a rest for me, right?
Now he's enlightened.
Yeah, I am enlightened. I'm going to go back home and I'm definitely going to think throughout this differently, especially the whole idea of being conscious.
It's going to come back as a higher being.
Yeah.
Okay.
Going to come back.
You just transformed him.
I'm going to be like basically completely bald, comes back like with a monk's gown.
Monk's robe.
What am I saying?
All right. Anyhow.
Imagine a monk in a gown. Oh my God.
All right. Anyways, just going to wrap this up. The whole idea of being conscious while you're being productive, right? All that was great to think about. And thank you so much
and
for us.
And why boredom is really important.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks
for throwing in the boredom bit. Thank you for us. Thank you, Zarmeena. I know you joined in as my co-host today. It was brilliant, actually. I quite enjoyed this. Yeah. This was a little in-house episode.
Honestly, I loved it.
We really hope that you guys enjoyed this episode as well. I know this is a busy time for all of you. A lot of our listeners are students as well. So all I want to say is if you finish your exams, happy holidays. And if you're doing exams.
And if you're not a student, what do you do?
Let me finish. If you're a student and you're still doing exams, good luck on your exams. Take it easy. Take some time to listen to this episode, all of it. There's a bunch of great facts that Firas mentioned. And if you're not a student,
spend some time with your family and do something for yourself.
Enjoy yourself. Enjoy life. Because right now being a student sucks at the moment.